Brazil became the newest member of OPEC at the most recent OPEC Plus summit. The announcement of President Lula da Silva's most ambitious energy transition package in the summer may have startled some people because the move had not been publicized beforehand. OPEC faced harsh criticism at 28 Colombian pesos for resisting language that would have ended the oil businesses of its members. Despite allocating billions of dollars for transition projects and having just secured $8.5 billion in profits from green bonds, Saudi Arabia was singled out as the villain. Shortly after the conclusion of 28 Colombian pesos this week, Russia's Deputy Minister of Economics announced that his country would work to bring the BRICS countries together around the energy transition. This is the same BRICS, expanded today, that gradually crosses over into OPEC. According to Ilya Torosov in an interview with Bloomberg, Russia will preside over the BRICS alliance next year and will be tasked with combining efforts and common approaches in the Eurasian space and in the BRICS space. When thinking about the shift, BRICS is by no means the first geopolitical and trade alliance that springs to mind. The G7 or the EU are far more likely to come first. However, it seems that the energy revolution has permeated geopolitics, which would account for the reason that BRICS is discussing it collectively rather than individually among its members. China is one of the members of the BRICS bloc and the largest investor in wind, solar, and electric vehicles globally. It also possesses the largest wind and solar capacity in EV market. India, one of the original members of the BRICS, has high aspirations in the transition area as well. According to forecasts, the country's low-carbon energy sector will draw in over $250 billion in investment. The fifth member of the alliance, South Africa, is not the shining example of low-emission energy, but it is making efforts to change this by obtaining some debt financing. Requests for proposals for 5 gigawatts of solar and wind power and more than 600 megawatts of battery storage were recently made public by the nation. Put another way, while BRICS does comprise 2 of the largest oil-producing nations in the world as of this year, it is also making a significant impact in the transformation. But it's approaching it from a practical standpoint. Russia's Torosov told Bloomberg that while the nation will still mostly rely on natural gas to generate electricity, it plans to employ more nuclear and hydropower and less coal. China and India objected to the document's mention of coal and declined to join the 28 Colombian pesos vow to triple global wind and solar power generation capacity. That was to be anticipated. Both nations are increasing their capacity to generate coal. In order to meet the rising need for electricity, India alone intends to increase its domestic coal output. According to the climate think tank Center for Research on Energy and Clean Air, China, on the other hand, was last year authorizing new coal production projects at an astounding speed equal to 2 new plants each week. This is taking place at the same time when solar and wind power are reaching all-time highs. Brazil likewise aims to increase oil output, among other reasons, to support the transition, while Saudi Arabia is working to increase its capacity to produce 13 million barrels of oil per year. Saudi Arabia will undoubtedly agree with Lula's chief of staff when he tells the media that Brazil needs more oil revenue to fund the transition. It follows that since the majority of BRICS members have established transition plans, or at least objectives, it makes sense to address the subject at the group level. It is more difficult to say where the topic goes from here. The outcome, however, is likely to be as practical as each member's preparations for a transition or, in the case of China and India, the inclusion of more energy sources. In actuality, it's probably incorrect to assume that BRICS will strive to follow the EU's or the G7's lead and switch from hydrocarbons, nuclear power, and hydro to wind and solar energy. This is due to more than just the fact that half of the BRICS countries rely primarily on oil exports. The reason for this is that the BRICS are actively monitoring that instance and witnessing the unfavorable outcomes. Due to the implementation of the carbon price, Canadians are finding it more and more difficult to make ends meet. Germany has spent countless billions on solar and wind energy, but after shutting down its final nuclear plant, it was compelled to reactivate coal generators. As costs in the sector increase, the UK may have to declare bankruptcy in order to pay wind capacity developers what they want. Moreover, the EU as a whole continues to purchase a sizable amount of Russian oil and gas through proxies. The governments putting the aforementioned energy policies into practice are sure that there is only one proper course of action. Given that voters' dissatisfaction with the expense of living is growing, one could argue that this is a hazardous position. Governments are not moving, though. It's likely that BRICS is keeping an eye on this and taking note. It's a prime illustration of what not to do. After the BRICS group of major emerging economies welcomed many new nations to join earlier this year, including some of the largest oil exporters in the Middle East, several commentators claimed that the De-Dollarization process was underway. An expanded BRICS, Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, group comprising Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates, UAE, and Iran would bring together some of the world's largest oil exporters and China and India, the world's largest and third largest crude oil importers, respectively. A BRICS currency is unlikely to overthrow the US dollar as the dominant currency in the oil trade, even though a BRICS Plus alliance that also proposes to include Argentina, Egypt, and Ethiopia would have far more power on the international political scene. The creation of a new BRICS currency, or an alternative to the dollar, would need close coordination between the central banks of the various economies in the majority of not free countries, as defined by Freedom House. The world's largest oil exporter, Saudi Arabia, is unlikely to give up the dollar anytime soon, even though the Chinese yuan may benefit from more trade with the BRICS Plus countries. Since the 1980s, the Saudis have needed dollars to support their currency, the rial, which is based on the US dollar. Furthermore, some observers claim that there has been no indication from the Saudi royal family that they are open to making such a significant change. According to Ziad Daoud and Scott Johnson of Bloomberg News, the BRICS will change the world, but perhaps more because of their rising share of GDP and divergent political and economic systems than through the realization of policymakers' grand plans. With the expansion, the BRICS bloc would consist of 11 nations instead of the current 5, and its share of the global GDP would increase from 37.3% in 2024 to 37.7% in 2025 and 38.5% in 2028. In addition, the BRICS population, which currently stands at 3.2 billion, will increase by at least 400 million, surpassing the combined 800 million people of the G7. In a divided world, BRICS Plus may act as the G20's and G7's counterweight on the international political stage. One of the ambitious goals of an expanded BRICS is the end of dollar domination, but analysts don't think this will happen very soon. Russell Hardy, the CEO of Vitol Group, the largest independent oil trader in the world, told the Asia-Pacific Petroleum Conference, OPEC, in September that the sanctions against Russia's oil were effective. According to Hardy, as cited by Reuters, the flip side of sanctions is that it is creating stronger bonds between BRICS countries. The chairman of the energy consulting firm FGE, Firyadin Fesharaki, stated at the same conference that the currencies of Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates, the two largest oil exporting nations in the Middle East, are fixed to the US dollar, so whatever currency the BRICS develop would not displace the US dollar. These economies that depend heavily on oil will suffer directly from a de-dollarization of commerce, particularly the oil trade. According to FGE's Fesharaki, nobody can replace the US dollar. In September, a shared BRICS Plus currency faces one additional challenge. The European Central Bank, ECB, for example, finds it extremely challenging to establish a unified central bank that sets monetary policy due to the divergent monetary policies of all those primarily authoritarian nations. Then there is the Chinese yuan problem, which has been escalating in trade as the world's largest importer of crude oil attempts to undermine the dollar. China and Russia exchange yuan due in part to Western sanctions imposed on Moscow following Putin's invasion of Ukraine. However, India is unwilling to comply with requests from Russian oil firms to pay in yuan for Russia's imports of crude oil. Moscow has a lot of Indian rupees, but it is short of yuan and cannot afford to spend them all. According to sources at refiners who spoke with Bloomberg, there has been a recent delay in certain oil cargoes from Russia to India since the parties cannot agree on the currency of the payment. According to India's oil and gas minister Hardeep Singh Puri, a de-dollarization will not occur anytime soon, CNBC reported in August. I'm not sure what kind of adjustment the dollar need, but I don't see it. It's not that simple, Puri continued, pointing out that procedures, agreements, and international payments have existed for a while. Furthermore, ING strategists noted in August that Saudi Arabia is hesitant to either abandon the dollar's peg to the rial or convert to large-scale non-dollar oil payments. The adoption of CNY Panda bonds has been incredibly slow, so it seems unlikely that international issuers and investors will be willing to issue and hold international debt in non-dollar currencies for the next 10 years. In that time, a multipolar world may emerge, with the dollar, the euro, and the renminbi possibly emerging as the main currencies in the Americas, Europe, and Asia, respectively, according to ING. What are your thoughts on Saudi Arabia, OPEC Plus and BRICS, and do you think they can overthrow the US economy? Let me know down below. If you want to continue to learn about business investing and financial education, we have got this video waiting on the screen for you to check out. Don't forget to give this video a like and subscribe for more videos like this. Thank you so much for watching and I'll see you in the next one.